The stable girl's hands shook as she brushed the king's favorite mare. Word had spread through the castle like wildfire that morning. King Edmund would choose a new queen before winter's end. 100 noble daughters from across the realm had been summoned to court, each one more beautiful and accomplished than the last, each one desperate to wear the crown that had sat empty for 3 long years. Mara pressed her face against the horse's warm neck and tried not to think about it. She was nothing, less than nothing. The daughter of a blacksmith who had died owing debts to half the kingdom. She lived in the stables now, sleeping in the hayloft and earning her keep by caring for the royal horses. The closest she had ever come to luxury was brushing the tangles from a thoroughbred's mane. The great wooden doors of the stable creaked open. Mara's heart stopped. King Edmund himself stood in the doorway, his broad shoulders filling the frame. Sunlight caught the silver threads in his dark hair. At 35 he was still the most handsome man in the kingdom, despite the lines of grief that had etched themselves around his green eyes since Queen Isabella's death. "Your Majesty." Mara dropped into a clumsy curtsy, her rough woolen skirt catching on a piece of straw. "I did not expect, that is, I was just finishing with Moonbeam's grooming." "Rise, child." The king's voice was gentler than she had expected. He stepped into the stable, and she caught the scent of leather and pine that always seemed to follow him. "I wanted to see how she fares. The mare has been restless lately." Mara straightened slowly, keeping her eyes fixed on the ground. "She misses riding." "Your Majesty," she was Queen Isabella's favorite. "I think she remembers." Something flickered across the king's face. Pain, perhaps, or something deeper. He moved to the mare's stall and ran his hand along her neck. "You speak of her as if she were human. Sometimes I think animals understand more than we give them credit for." The words slipped out before Mara could stop them. Heat flooded her cheeks. "Forgive me, Your Majesty, I speak out of turn." But King Edmund was studying her now, his green eyes curious rather than angry. "What is your name?" "Mara, Your Majesty, Mara Fletcher." "Fletcher, you are the blacksmith's daughter." She nodded, shame burning in her throat. "He left debts, Your Majesty. I work to pay them." "And you have been caring for my horses for how long?" 2 years, Your Majesty. Since I came to the castle." The king was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that made her world tilt sideways. "Would you like to ride her?" "Moonbeam, I mean." Mara's head snapped up. "Your Majesty? The mare needs exercise. You clearly care for her welfare. Why should you not ride her?" "I could not. It would not be proper. I am only a stable girl." King Edmund's smile was sad and knowing. "Proper? Yes, I suppose there is much that would not be proper." He turned toward the door, then paused. "The choice is yours, Mara Fletcher. But if you decide to ride, take the path through the oak grove." It was Isabella's favorite. Then he was gone, leaving Mara alone with her racing heart and 100 impossible dreams. The next morning brought the first of the noble daughters. Lady Catherine of Westmarch arrived in a carriage that gleamed like a jewel, drawn by 4 white horses with braided manes. She was everything Mara was not, golden-haired and porcelain-skinned, with a waist so tiny it seemed she might snap in a strong wind. Her gown was the color of summer sky, with pearls sewn into every seam. Mara watched from the stable doorway as Lady Catherine was escorted into the castle by a dozen servants. The lady's laugh tinkled like silver bells, and even from a distance, Mara could see how she tilted her head just so when she spoke to the guards. Everything about her was calculated to charm. Quite a sight, is she not? Mira spun around to find Sir Thomas, the king's closest adviser, standing behind her. His weathered face wore an expression of mild amusement. "She is very beautiful, my lord," Mara said carefully. "Beautiful, yes. And wealthy. Her father controls the grain trade in 3 provinces." Sir Thomas stepped up beside her, his gaze following the procession. "Tell me, child, what do you think our king seeks in a wife?" The question caught Mara off guard. I would not presume to know, my lord. Come now, you have eyes. You have spent time in his presence. What manner of woman do you think would suit him?" Mara bit her lip, uncertain why Sir Thomas was asking such questions of a stable girl. "His Majesty loved Queen Isabella very much," she said slowly. "Perhaps he seeks someone who might understand that love, rather than trying to replace it." Sir Thomas nodded approvingly. "Wisdom from an unexpected source. Tell me, Mara Fletcher, do you think Lady Catherine understands such things?" Before Mara could answer, a commotion erupted in the courtyard. Lady Catherine's voice rose in sharp distress. "Get that filthy creature away from me! How dare you allow such vermin near a lady of my standing?" Mara peered around Sir Thomas to see what had caused the upset. A small grey cat, one of the many strays that lived around the stables, had apparently wandered too close to Lady Catherine's silk slippers. The lady was backing away as if the animal carried plague, her face twisted with disgust. "Interesting," Sir Thomas murmured. Then, louder, he called to one of the servants. "See that the cat is fed and given a place by the kitchen fires. Her Majesty always said a castle without cats was a castle overrun with rats." Lady Catherine's expression suggested she would prefer the rats. Over the following weeks, more noble daughters arrived. Lady Rosalind of Northdale, who spoke 3 languages and played the harp like an angel. Lady Margaret of Ironhold, whose father commanded the largest army outside the king's own. Lady Vivian of Goldmere, who could recite poetry in Latin and embroider flowers so real they seemed to breathe. Each was more accomplished than the last, each more suitable to be queen, and with each arrival Mara felt herself growing smaller and more invisible. She took to riding Moonbeam in the early mornings before the castle stirred to life. The king had given permission after all, even if he had likely forgotten by now. The mare seemed to come alive on those rides, her ears pricked forward and her step light as they cantered through the oak grove where Queen Isabella had once ridden. It was on one such morning that disaster struck. Mara was guiding Moonbeam down a narrow forest path when a rabbit darted across their way. The mare shied violently, and Mara felt herself sliding from the saddle. She hit the ground hard, her left wrist twisting beneath her with a sharp crack that made her gasp. Moonbeam, meanwhile, had bolted. Mara could hear the thunder of hooves growing fainter as the mare raced back toward the castle. By the time Mara managed to get to her feet, cradling her injured wrist, Moonbeam was gone. The walk back to the castle seemed to take forever. Mara's wrist throbbed with each step, and she could already see the angry swelling beneath her torn sleeve. Worse than the pain, though, was the dread that coiled in her stomach. She had lost the king's favorite horse, Queen Isabella's mare. There would be consequences for this, and she had no doubt they would be severe. She was still a quarter-mile from the castle gates when she heard the riders approaching. King Edmund himself led the group, mounted on his black stallion. Behind him rode Sir Thomas and several guards. And there, prancing nervously between 2 of the guards' horses, was Moonbeam. The king's face was grim as he reined in beside Mara. "Are you hurt?" "My wrist, your Majesty, but Moonbeam is unharmed." "I made certain of that before walking miles with a broken bone." King Edmund dismounted in one fluid motion. "Let me see, your Majesty, "It is not necessary. I can tend to it myself." But the king was already reaching for her arm with gentle hands. His touch sent warmth shooting up her arm that had nothing to do with the injury. "It is broken," he said after a moment. "Sir Thomas, ride ahead and summon the physician." "Your Majesty, please," Mara protested. "I cannot afford a physician. Perhaps the cook might." "You will see the physician." The king's tone brooked no argument. "And you will not speak of payment. You were injured while caring for my horse. That makes you my responsibility." Before Mara could protest further, King Edmund had lifted her onto his stallion and swung up behind her. The warmth of his chest against her back made her head spin worse than the pain in her wrist. She could feel the steady rhythm of his breathing, smell the familiar scent of leather and pine that clung to his clothes. "Why did you not call for help?" he asked as they rode toward the castle. I hoped I might catch Moonbeam myself. I did not wish to cause trouble. You could have died out there. Broken bones can turn to fever. Wild animals roam those woods. I know these woods well, Your Majesty. I have walked them since I was a child." The king was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You remind me of her sometimes. Isabella. She would have done the same thing. Walked miles rather than cause trouble for others." Mara's breath caught. "Your Majesty does me too much honor." "Do I?" His voice was so low she almost missed it. "I begin to wonder." The castle physician was a thin, fussy man who clucked over Mara's wrist like a mother hen. He set the bone with practiced efficiency, bound it with clean linen, and prescribed rest for the next several weeks. "No heavy lifting," he instructed. "No grooming horses. The bone must heal properly, or you may lose the use of that hand." Mara nodded dutifully, though her heart sank. If she could not work, how would she pay for her keep? How would she pay her father's debts? As if reading her thoughts, King Edmund stepped forward. "She will be given light duties in the castle, perhaps helping with the preparations for the choosing ceremony." The choosing ceremony. Mara had almost forgotten. In just 2 weeks, King Edmund would select his bride from among the noble daughters. The entire kingdom would celebrate, and Mara would watch from the shadows as some beautiful lady took the crown that had belonged to Queen Isabella. "Your Majesty is most kind," she managed. But when she looked up, she found the king studying her with an expression she could not read. Something intense and searching that made her feel as if he could see straight through to her soul. The light duties King Edmund had promised turned out to be working in the castle's great library. Mara spent her days organizing scrolls and cleaning the leather bindings of ancient books. It was quiet work that suited her healing wrist, but it also gave her far too much time to think. From the library's tall windows, she could see the courtyard where the noble daughters took their daily walks. They moved in groups like flocks of bright birds, their silk gowns rustling as they practiced the art of being noticed. Lady Catherine had emerged as the clear favourite among the courtiers. She had a way of laughing that drew every eye in the room, and she never seemed to be at a loss for clever conversation. Lady Rosalind, meanwhile, had impressed everyone by composing a song in honour of Queen Isabella's memory. It was a lovely gesture, and politically astute. The king would appreciate such thoughtfulness. Lady Margaret had taken a different approach, discussing military strategy with the king's advisers and demonstrating her knowledge of statecraft. She would make a practical queen, everyone agreed. A useful alliance. And then there was Lady Vivian, who had somehow managed to obtain Queen Isabella's favourite book of poetry, and was often seen reading it in the garden. The very picture of romantic devotion. Each of them had something to offer. Each had been trained from birth for this moment. What did Mara have? Calloused hands and a talent for calming skittish horses. It was laughable. really. She was so lost in her gloomy thoughts that she did not hear the library door open. It was only when a shadow fell across her table that she looked up to find King Edmund standing there. "Your Majesty." She started to rise, but he waved her back to her seat. "How is the wrist?" "Healing well, Your Majesty. The physician says I may return to light work in a few days." "Good." He moved to the window, gazing out at the courtyard where Lady Catherine was holding court beneath a flowering apple tree. "Tell me, Mara, what do you think of our guests?" The question seemed like a trap, but Mara could not see the snare. "They are all very accomplished, Your Majesty. Any one of them would make a fine queen." "Accomplished, yes. But what do you think of them as people?" Mara chose her words carefully. "I am hardly in a position to judge such ladies, Your Majesty. You have eyes, you have judgment. I am asking for your honest opinion." Still Mara hesitated. Finally, King Edmund turned from the window and fixed her with that intense green gaze. "Please, I find myself uncertain. I would value your perspective." There was something in his voice, a note of vulnerability that made her decision for her. "Lady Catherine is charming and beautiful," she said slowly, "but I think she might find it difficult to love anything that could not enhance her own beauty in return." The king's eyebrows rose slightly. "Go on." "Lady Rosalind is genuinely kind, I believe, but she seems fragile, as if the weight of a crown might crush her. Lady Margaret is strong and clever, but I think she sees marriage as a military campaign to be won rather than a bond to be cherished." "And Lady Vivian?" Mara bit her lip. "Lady Vivian tries very hard to be what she thinks you want, but I do not think she knows who she is beneath all that trying." King Edmund was quiet for a long moment. "You see much for one who claims to be in no position to judge." "Perhaps because I am in no position to judge, I have no agenda, Your Majesty. No family honor to uphold or alliance to secure. I can simply see." "And what do you see when you look at me?" The question was so unexpected that Mara's breath caught. "Your Majesty, do you see a king searching for a politically advantageous marriage? A widower desperate to fill an empty space in his bed? A man trying to replace what he has lost?" "I see," Mara struggled to find the words. "I see a man who loved his wife very much and is afraid that choosing someone new means forgetting her. I see someone who carries the weight of a kingdom on his shoulders and sometimes wishes he could set it down, just for a moment. I see someone who is lonely but does not know how to stop being lonely without betraying the memory of the one he lost." The silence that followed stretched so long that Mara began to fear she had overstepped terribly. But when she finally dared to look up, King Edmund's expression was not angry. It was something closer to wonder. "How do you see so much?" he asked softly. "Because I know what it is to lose someone you love," Mara replied. "And I know what it is to feel responsible for things beyond your control." The king moved closer until he was standing just beside her chair. "Your father?" "My mother, actually. She died when I was 12. A fever that the physician could not break. My father never recovered from losing her. He began drinking, making poor decisions. It was grief that ruined him, not weakness." "And you blame yourself?" It was not a question. Mara nodded anyway. "If I had been older, stronger, perhaps I could have helped him bear it. Perhaps I could have prevented him from drowning in debt and despair." "You were a child." "Yes, but children often believe they can save the adults they love, even when those adults are beyond saving." King Edmund reached out then, his fingers brushing lightly against her cheek. "You have tears in your eyes." Mara had not realized she was crying. She started to pull away, but the king's touch was gentle, comforting rather than demanding. "I should not burden your majesty with such things," she whispered. "You are not a burden, Mara Fletcher. You are—" He seemed to struggle with the words. "You are the first person in 3 years to speak to me as if I were simply a man rather than a crown." Their eyes met and held. Mara felt as if she were falling, tumbling into those green depths with no hope of finding solid ground again. This was dangerous territory. This was madness. "Your Majesty," she began, but he shook his head. "Edmund, when we are alone, I am simply Edmund. I cannot what? Speak my name? See me as human?" His thumb traced along her cheekbone, and Mara shivered. "Cannot feel what I feel when I look at you." "You are going to choose a bride in 10 days, Mara said desperately. "One of those beautiful, accomplished ladies who can give you everything a king needs. And what if what this king needs is not what everyone expects him to need?" Before Mara could answer, voices echoed in the corridor outside. King Edmund stepped back quickly, his expression shifting back to the careful mask he wore in public. "Think about what I have said," he told her quietly. Then, louder, "I trust you will have the arrangements for the library cataloguing completed by week's end." "Yes, Your Majesty," Mara replied, her voice somehow steady despite the chaos in her chest. The door opened to admit Sir Thomas and 2 other advisers. They bowed to the king and cast curious glances at Mara, but if they suspected anything unusual had occurred, they gave no sign. "Your Majesty," Sir Thomas said, "the final group of ladies has arrived. Lady Elena of Southaven and her companions." "Ah, yes, I should greet them properly." King Edmund moved toward the door, then paused. "Sir Thomas, please ensure that Mara has everything she needs for her work here. She has proven invaluable." After they left, Mara sat alone among the ancient books and tried to make sense of what had just happened. King Edmund had touched her face. He had asked her to call him by his name. He had spoken of feelings, of needs that went beyond politics and duty. But he was still a king, and she was still a stable girl with nothing to offer but a broken wrist and a debt-ridden name. The next few days passed in a blur of confusion and stolen glances. Mara threw herself into her library work, but her concentration was shattered. Every time the door opened, her heart leaped with the hope and fear that it might be Edmund. When it was not, she felt deflated. When it was, she felt as if she might fly apart with the intensity of her emotions. Edmund began visiting the library daily, always with some official reason. He needed a particular map. He wanted to review the agricultural records from the eastern provinces. He was researching the lineage of one of the noble families, but his true purpose became clear in the way his eyes sought hers, in the careful way he positioned himself so that his hand might brush against hers when he reached for a book, in the soft tone he used when speaking her name. "You are playing a dangerous game, Your Majesty," Mara said one afternoon when they were alone. "Edmund," he corrected automatically. "And what game is that?" "You know what game. This, whatever this is, between us. It cannot lead anywhere good." "Cannot it?" He was standing close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "What if I told you that you have brought me more peace in these few weeks than I have felt in 3 years? What if I told you that when I close my eyes, it is your face I see, not the faces of 100 noble daughters? Then I would say you are confusing gratitude with something deeper. I helped you see the ladies more clearly. Nothing more. Did you? Or did you help me see myself more clearly?" His hand covered hers on the table. "Mara, I have been dead inside since Isabella died, going through the motions of living, of ruling, but feeling nothing. You have awakened something in me that I thought was gone forever. Your Majesty, Edmund, you are going to be married in 6 days to someone who can stand beside you as an equal, someone who can give you heirs and alliances and everything a kingdom needs from its queen. And what if what I need is someone who sees my soul rather than my crown, someone who makes me laugh, who challenges me to think differently, who reminds me what it feels like to simply be human. Mara's resolve was crumbling. I am a stable girl. I have nothing to offer. A king. You have everything to offer the man. His voice was rough with emotion. You have kindness and wisdom, and a heart that sees past surface beauty to the truth beneath. You have courage and strength, and a way of making me feel as if I could conquer the world, or lay it down at your feet, whichever you preferred. Edmund, please. I love you. The words hung in the air between them like a bridge neither of them had expected to find. I know it is impossible. I know it is foolish. But I love you, Mara Fletcher, and I do not know how to stop. Tears were streaming down Mara's face now. You do not love me. You love the idea of me, the simple girl who asks for nothing and expects nothing. But if I were truly your queen, everything would change. The burden of the crown, the expectations of the court, the needs of the kingdom, it would destroy whatever you think you feel for me. Then, let us find out together. Edmund cupped her face in his hands, thumbs brushing away her tears. Marry me, Mara, not because it makes political sense, but because it is what my heart demands. The court will never accept it. The noble families will revolt. Your advisors will think you have lost your mind. Perhaps I have, but I would rather be mad with love than sane with duty. His forehead touched hers. Say yes, please. Give me a reason to believe in happiness again. For one wild moment, Mara allowed herself to imagine it, walking down the aisle of the great cathedral in a gown of white silk, wearing Queen Isabella's crown, standing beside Edmund as he ruled the kingdom, supporting him, loving him, building a life together that was based on something real and deep and true. But then reality crashed back down around her. The noble daughters, Edmund. You have invited them here with the promise that one of them will be chosen, to reject them all for a stable girl. It would be seen as an insult that could never be forgiven. Then we will make them understand. We will show them that love can triumph over convention. Love? Lady Catherine's voice cut through the library like a blade of ice. How fascinating. Mara and Edmund sprang apart to find Lady Catherine standing in the doorway, her beautiful face twisted with malicious delight. Behind her clustered several other noble daughters, their eyes wide with shock and calculation. Lady Catherine, Edmund said, his voice carefully controlled, I did not hear you enter. Clearly, Lady Catherine's gaze flicked between them, taking in Mara's tear-stained face and Edmund's protective stance. We came seeking you to discuss the arrangements for tomorrow's hunt. But it seems we have stumbled upon something far more educational. You will speak of this to no one, Edmund commanded, but Lady Catherine only laughed. Will I not? Oh, Your Majesty, I think you overestimate your power in this situation. The stable girl. Really? How quaint. Lady Catherine, Mara began, but the woman cut her off with a wave of her jeweled hand. Do not presume to speak to me, girl. You have caused quite enough trouble already. She turned back to Edmund, her expression shifting to one of wounded nobility. To think that while we have been competing for your hand like civilized ladies, you have been dallying with the servants. It is disappointing. Mara is not a servant, Edmund said quietly. She is the woman I intend to marry. The words hit the group of ladies like a physical blow. Lady Rosalind gasped and swayed on her feet. Lady Margaret's face darkened with anger. Lady Vivian simply stared as if she could not comprehend what she had heard. But Lady Catherine smiled, and there was nothing pleasant about the expression. How romantic, and how utterly ruinous. Do you have any idea what this will do to your kingdom, your majesty? The alliances that will be broken, the insults that will be perceived. My father alone commands enough grain to feed 3 provinces. Lady Margaret's father has an army of 10,000 men, and you would cast us all aside for, what? A pretty face and a willingness to spread her legs for a crown? You'll not speak of her that way. Edmund's voice was deadly quiet. I will speak of her exactly as she deserves to be spoken of, a grasping little peasant who has somehow bewitched a king into forgetting his duty to his kingdom. Lady Catherine's eyes glittered with malice. But do not worry, your majesty. We will help you remember what you owe to your people. She swept from the library with the other ladies trailing behind her like the wake of a particularly destructive storm. In the silence that followed, Mara felt the walls of her small, safe world collapsing around her. This is what I was afraid of, she whispered. This is why it could never work. Mara, do not let her poison turn you against what we have found together. What we have found together. Mara's voice broke. Edmund, in the space of 5 minutes, she has made it clear that choosing me would mean economic warfare, possible military action, and the contempt of every noble family in the kingdom. How can you ask me to be responsible for such destruction? You would not be responsible. I would be making the choice. A choice that could destroy everything you have worked to build. Everything your father and his father built before him. Mara shook her head. I cannot let you do it. I will not be the reason your kingdom falls into chaos. So what are you saying? The words felt like glass in her throat. I am saying that you need to choose one of them. Tomorrow, if possible, make it clear that what Lady Catherine saw was merely a moment of weakness. A king taking pity on a lonely servant girl. I will not dishonor what we have by calling it weakness. Then call it madness. Call it anything you like, but end it, Edmund, before it destroys us both. Without giving him a chance to respond, Mara fled the library. She ran through the castle corridors, ignoring the startled looks of servants and guards, and did not stop until she reached the stables. There, surrounded by the familiar scents of hay and leather, she finally allowed herself to sob. She cried for the dream that had bloomed and died in the space of a few weeks. She cried for the impossible love that had made her feel, for just a moment, as if she were more than a stable girl with debt-ridden blood. Most of all, she cried for Edmund, who would now have to choose a bride while knowing that his heart belonged to someone he could never have. It was there that Sir Thomas found her an hour later. Lady Catherine has been busy, he said without preamble. The entire castle knows by now that the king has been intimate with a member of the staff. Mara looked up, her eyes swollen from crying. How bad is it? Bad enough. The noble daughters are in an uproar. Some are demanding to leave immediately, seeing the insult to their honor. Others are circling like vultures, sensing an opportunity in the king's apparent instability. Sir Thomas sat down on a hay bale across from her. What will you do? What can I do? I will leave the castle. Tonight, if possible. Perhaps if I am gone, the scandal will die down, and His Majesty can salvage the situation. And go where? With what money? Your wrist is barely healed, and you still owe your father's debts. Mara had not thought that far ahead. I will find work somewhere. As a kitchen maid, perhaps, or a seamstress. Anything that will let me disappear. Sir Thomas was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, there is another option. What do you mean? The king could marry you. Sir Thomas, you saw what happened in the library. The chaos that would cause would be considerable, he agreed, but not insurmountable. Kings have married for love before, though rarely with such dramatic circumstances. You think I should accept him, even knowing what it would cost the kingdom? I think, Sir Thomas said carefully, that a kingdom ruled by a king who has forgotten how to love is a kingdom in danger of losing its soul. Edmund has been going through the motions for 3 years, doing his duty, but without passion or joy or hope. You have given him back those things that may be worth more than all the political alliances in the world. And if the noble families rebel, if there is civil war, then we will face it together, as we have faced every other challenge. But Mora, Sir Thomas leaned forward, his expression intense. If you truly love him, do not make this decision based on fear. Make it based on what you believe is right. After Sir Thomas left, Mara sat alone in the gathering darkness and tried to think clearly. Every rational part of her mind said that leaving was the right choice, the safe choice, the choice that would cause the least harm to the most people. But another part of her, a part that had been growing stronger every day since she met Edmund, whispered different words. What if love was not a luxury, but a necessity? What if a king who ruled without passion was worse than a kingdom facing political turmoil? What if running away was not protection, but cowardice? She was still wrestling with these questions when she heard footsteps outside the stable. For a moment her heart leaped with the hope that it might be Edmund, but the figure who appeared in the doorway was Lady Rosalind. "May I come in?" the young woman asked hesitantly. Mara nodded, not trusting her voice. Lady Rosalind stepped into the stable, her silk gown rustling against the straw. In the dim light, she looked younger and more fragile than ever. "I wanted to apologize," Lady Rosalind said quietly, "for Lady Catherine's words. They were cruel and unnecessary." "You have nothing to apologize for, my lady. Do I not? I have been part of this competition. This parade of women vying for a man's attention as if he were a prize to be won rather than a person to be loved." Lady Rosalind moved to Moonbeam's stall, her hand reaching out to stroke the mare's nose. "I have been so focused on trying to be what I thought he wanted that I never stopped to consider what he actually needed." "And what do you think he needs?" "You." The answer came without hesitation. "I have watched him these past weeks, and I have seen the change in him. He smiles now, really smiles, not just the polite expression he wears in court. His eyes have light in them again. That is your doing." Tears burned behind Mara's eyes. "It does not matter what he needs if I cannot give it to him without destroying everything else he holds dear. Cannot you, or will you not?" Lady Rosalind turned to face her fully. "Mara, I know what it is to be afraid. I have spent my entire life being afraid of not being pretty enough, accomplished enough, worthy enough. But watching you and the king together, I realized that love is not about being worthy. It is about being brave enough to accept being loved despite our unworthiness. It is not that simple. Is it not? The king loves you, you love him. Everything else is just politics. Politics that could tear the kingdom apart, or politics that could be overcome by people who are willing to fight for something better." Lady Rosalind moved closer, her voice growing more urgent. "Mara, do you know what my life will be like if I marry for duty rather than love? I will spend every day trying to be perfect, to never disappoint, to always be what others expect me to be. I will have children who call me mother but never know me. I will grow old beside a man who respects me but does not cherish me. Is that truly better than the risk of chaos?" Mara stared at the young woman, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time. What are you saying? I am saying that I withdraw from consideration for the king's hand, and I suspect that if you were to ask them honestly, several of the other ladies would do the same. Lady Catherine may be furious, but she does not speak for all of us. But your families, the alliances, will survive, or they will not, and we will build new ones based on better foundations. Lady Rosalind smiled, and for the first time since Mara had known her, the expression reached her eyes. I am going to write to my father tonight. I am going to tell him that I have decided to enter a convent. It is not true, but it will give him an honorable way to withdraw from the competition without losing face. Lady Rosalind, Rosalind, just Rosalind. And you should know that Lady Margaret approached me earlier this evening. She is planning to return home tomorrow morning. Something about her father needing her assistance with military matters, but I suspect the truth is that she has realized the king's heart is already spoken for. Hope flickered in Mara's chest. Fragile but growing stronger. And the others? Lady Vivian is Lady Vivian. She will do whatever she thinks will gain her the most advantage, but she is not stupid. If enough of us withdraw, she may decide that pursuing a man who loves someone else is not worth the effort. Rosalind paused. That leaves Lady Catherine, who has the most to lose and the least scruple about how she wins. Yes, but Mara, what if you did not let her win by default? What if you fought for what you want? The conversation with Rosalind stayed with Mara through the long, sleepless night. By morning, she had made her decision. She would not run, she would not hide. She would not let fear make her choices for her. But first, she needed to see Edmund. She found him in the castle's small chapel, kneeling before the altar where he had once knelt beside Queen Isabella. His head was bowed, his hands clasped before him, and he looked so alone that Mara's heart ached. "Edmund," she said softly. He looked up, and she saw that his eyes were red-rimmed with exhaustion. "Mara, I thought, after yesterday, I thought you might have left already. I considered it." She moved down the aisle toward him, her footsteps echoing in the sacred space. "But running away is not the answer to anything. I know that better than most." "Then what is the answer?" She knelt beside him, close enough to see the lines of strain around his eyes. "The answer is that I love you. Not the king, not the crown, not the idea of what my life could be. I love the man who grieves for his lost wife, but still has room in his heart for new love. I love the man who worries about a restless horse and takes time to speak kindly to a stable girl. I love the man who would give up everything for love, even when love cannot possibly be worth such a sacrifice." Edmund's breath caught. "Mara, I love you," she continued, "and if you still want me, if you are still willing to face whatever comes, then yes, I will marry you." The kiss that followed was soft and desperate and full of promises neither of them was sure they could keep. When they finally broke apart, Edmund rested his forehead against hers. "It will not be easy," he warned. "There will be those who never accept you, who see you as an upstart and a pretender. There will also be those who see that their king is happy again, that he rules with passion as well as duty, that love has made him stronger, not weaker." "And Lady Catherine?" Mara's smile was grim. "Lady Catherine can do her worst, but she cannot change the fact that you are the king, and I am the woman you have chosen to love. Everything else is just noise." The announcement was made that afternoon. King Edmund summoned all the noble daughters to the great hall and stood before them with Mara at his side. "Ladies," he began, his voice carrying easily through the vast space, "I asked you here because I believed it was time for me to take a wife. I believed that duty demanded I choose a bride from among the noble houses of the realm. But I have learned something in these past weeks. I have learned that a king who rules without love in his heart is only half a king, and I have found that love in the most unexpected place." The murmur that ran through the assembled ladies was not entirely hostile. Mara saw Lady Rosalind smile and nod encouragingly. Lady Margaret looked resigned, but not angry. Even Lady Vivian seemed more curious than outraged. But Lady Catherine's face was a mask of cold fury. "Therefore," Edmund continued, "I announce my intention to marry Mara Fletcher and to make her my queen. I know this is not what many of you expected. I know it may seem like a betrayal of tradition and propriety, but I believe that a kingdom founded on love will be stronger than one founded on mere political convenience." "This is madness," Lady Catherine spoke into the silence that followed. "Your Majesty, surely you cannot be serious. This person has nothing to offer the crown. No dowry, no alliance, no noble blood. She is a servant, a nobody." "She is the woman I love," Edmund replied simply. "And that makes her everything. Love." Lady Catherine spat the word as if it tasted bitter. "What is love compared to the needs of a kingdom? What happens when the grain harvests fail because my father withdraws his support? What happens when rebellions spring up because the people have lost respect for a king who puts his personal desires above his duty? Then I will face those challenges as I have faced every other challenge in my reign. But I will face them with a queen beside me who loves me, supports me, and reminds me why I rule in the first place." Lady Catherine looked around the room, seeking support from the other noble daughters. But Lady Rosalind had moved to stand beside Mara, her chin lifted in defiance. Lady Margaret remained neutral, but made no move to join Catherine's protest. Lady Vivian was studying the situation with calculating eyes, clearly weighing her options. "You are making a mistake that will cost you your kingdom," Lady Catherine said finally. "Perhaps," Edmund agreed. "But I would rather lose a kingdom while living as a complete man than keep it while existing as half of one." In the days that followed, the castle became a whirlwind of activity and gossip. Most of the noble daughters departed within a week, some in anger, others with surprising grace. Lady Rosalind stayed long enough to attend the engagement ceremony, standing as Mara's witness and friend. Lady Margaret offered congratulations that seemed genuine, if reserved. Even Lady Vivian managed to be polite, though Mara suspected she was already planning how to use this turn of events to her own advantage elsewhere. Lady Catherine, however, remained. She took up residence in the castle's guest quarters and made it clear that she intended to stay until the very last moment, presumably hoping that Edmund would come to his senses and change his mind. She also began a subtle campaign of sabotage, nothing that could be directly traced to her, but a constant stream of small cruelties designed to make Mara's life miserable. Servants who had been friendly suddenly turned cold. Invitations to court functions mysteriously went astray. Whispered conversations that stopped abruptly when Mara entered a room. "She is trying to drive you away," Sir Thomas observed one afternoon as they walked through the castle gardens. "Make you so uncomfortable that you withdraw from the engagement voluntarily." "I know." Mara paused beside a rosebush, her fingers trailing over the soft petals. "But I will not give her the satisfaction. Edmund and I have made our choice. We will live with the consequences, whatever they may be. Even if those consequences include civil unrest, economic hardship, political isolation, even then." Mara turned to face him, her expression resolute. "Sir Thomas, you have served this kingdom longer than anyone. Tell me honestly, do you think Edmund was a good king before he met me?" Sir Thomas considered the question carefully. He was a competent king, a dutiful king. He made sound decisions and kept the peace. But was he a good king? The kind of king who inspires people to be better than they are. the kind of king who leads with vision rather than just maintaining what came before. No, Sir Thomas admitted, he was not that kind of king. He was surviving, going through the motions, and now, a smile tugged at the older man's lips. Now he argues with me about agricultural policy because he has opinions again. He stays up late planning improvements to the roads and schools because he can envision a better future. He laughs at inappropriate moments during council meetings because he remembers what joy feels like. Then perhaps the kingdom is getting a better bargain than Lady Catherine believes. The wedding was set for the first day of spring. Mara had initially protested that it was too soon, that they needed more time to let the scandal die down and build support among the nobles. But Edmund had been adamant. Every day we delay gives our enemies more time to organize against us, he argued. Better to present them with a fait accompli and force them to work within the new reality. Besides, he added with a smile that made Mara's heart skip, he had waited long enough to make her his wife. The preparations were unlike anything Mara had ever imagined. Seamstresses descended upon her with bolts of silk and satin, measuring and pinning and adjusting until she felt like a doll being dressed for display. The royal jeweler brought forth a selection of tiaras and necklaces that made her dizzy with their brilliance. The castle's head cook consulted with her daily about the wedding feast, his excitement over the menu evident in every conversation. Through it all, Mara tried to remember that she was still herself beneath the silk and jewels. Still the blacksmith's daughter who had slept in hay lofts and worked with her hands, the woman Edmund had fallen in love with. But it was not always easy. The weight of expectation, the constant scrutiny, the knowledge that every move she made was being judged and evaluated by people looking for reasons to find her wanting, it was exhausting. The breaking point came 3 days before the wedding. Mara was in the castle's solar, reviewing the final details of the ceremony with the head priest, when Lady Catherine appeared in the doorway. "How cozy," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. The stable girl playing at being queen. "Lady Catherine," Mara said coolly, "I was not aware you were still in residence." "Oh, I would not miss this spectacle for the world. Though I do worry about what will happen afterward, when the novelty wears off and His Majesty realizes what he has bound himself to." The priest cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Perhaps I should return later, Your Majesty." "No," Mara said firmly. "We are nearly finished, and there is nothing Lady Catherine might say that requires privacy." Lady Catherine's smile turned predatory. "Is there not? How fascinating. Tell me, Your soon-to-be Majesty, what do you plan to do when the king grows tired of your rustic charms? When he realizes that running a kingdom requires more than a willingness to tumble in the hay with the horses?" "I plan to love him and support him and rule beside him as best I can," Mara replied evenly. "What do you plan to do when you realize that your beauty and your father's grain are not sufficient to make a man love you?" The barb hit home. Lady Catherine's face flushed with anger. "You think you have won something, do you not? You think that capturing a king's momentary infatuation makes you special, but I know what you really are. A grasping little peasant who opened her legs at just the right moment and now thinks she deserves a crown. That is enough." Edmund's voice cut across the solar like a blade. He stood in the doorway, his face dark with fury. "Lady Catherine, you will apologize to my bride immediately, or you will find yourself escorted from the castle before sunset." "Apologize? To her?" Lady Catherine laughed bitterly. "I think not, Your Majesty, but I will give you both a wedding gift. A prophecy, if you will." She moved closer, her eyes fixed on Mara with venomous intensity. "This marriage will be a disaster. Within a year, you will be dealing with rebellions in 3 provinces. Within 2 years, your treasury will be empty as trade agreements collapse. Within 3 years, you will be begging me to return and save what is left of your kingdom. Are you finished? Edmund asked coldly. Oh, I am finished with this place. Finished with watching a once great king destroy himself for a whore in a silk dress. Lady Catherine swept toward the door, then turned back for one final strike. But I will be waiting, Your Majesty. When this pretty dream turns into a nightmare, I will be waiting to pick up the pieces. She was gone before either of them could respond, leaving behind only the echo of her heels on the stone floor and the bitter scent of her perfume. In the silence that followed, Mara felt something crumble inside her chest. Not her resolve, exactly, but some small part of her that had been holding on to the hope that this might work without destroying everything Edmund held dear. She may be right, she whispered. Edmund crossed the room in 3 quick strides and pulled her into his arms. She is not right. She is angry and jealous and lashing out because she cannot bear to see us happy. But what if she is right about the rebellions, the economic problems? What if choosing me really does cost you your kingdom? Then we will build a new one, Edmund said fiercely. A better one. A kingdom founded on love and hope rather than fear and obligation. Mara wanted to believe him. With every fiber of her being, she wanted to believe that love could conquer all the practical realities that stood against them. But Lady Catherine's words echoed in her mind, planting seeds of doubt that would not be easily uprooted. The wedding dawned clear and bright, with the kind of crystalline spring air that seemed to promise new beginnings. Mara woke before sunrise in the Queen's chambers. Her chambers now, though she still felt like an impostor sleeping in Queen Isabella's bed. Lady Rosalind, who had stayed to serve as her matron of honor, was already bustling about the room with the efficiency of a military general. "Today is the day," she said cheerfully, throwing open the curtains to let in the morning light. "Are you ready to become a queen?" "I am ready to become Edmund's wife," Mara replied. "The queen part still terrifies me." "Good. It should." Queens who are not terrified of the responsibility tend to make poor decisions. Rosalind moved to the wardrobe and began pulling out the various components of Mara's wedding ensemble. "But I have watched you these past weeks, and I believe you will surprise everyone, including yourself." The wedding dress was a masterpiece of silk and lace, designed to complement Queen Isabella's crown and jewelry while still being distinctly Mara's own. The seamstresses had somehow managed to create something that looked both regal and approachable, elegant but not ostentatious. As Rosalind helped her into the gown, Mara caught sight of herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back at her. The stable girl was gone, replaced by someone who looked capable of standing beside a king. "You look beautiful," Rosalind said softly. "Edmund is going to weep when he sees you." "I hope not. Weeping kings do not inspire confidence in their subjects. Weeping kings inspire love in their subjects. There is a difference." The ceremony was held in the castle's great cathedral, with what seemed like half the kingdom in attendance. As Mara walked down the aisle on Sir Thomas's arm, he had offered to stand in for her father, and she had accepted gratefully. She tried to focus on Edmund's face rather than the sea of watching eyes around her. He was waiting at the altar in his finest clothes, his crown catching the light streaming through the stained glass windows. But it was his expression that took her breath away. Pure, unguarded joy mixed with something deeper, something that looked like awe. When she reached him, he took her hands in his and leaned close enough to whisper, "You are the most beautiful thing I have ever seen." "Even more beautiful than your prize mare?" she whispered back. His laugh was soft and delighted. "Much more beautiful, though Moonbeam might disagree." The ceremony itself passed in a blur of ancient words and sacred vows. Mara heard herself promising to love and honor and support Edmund through whatever challenges lay ahead. She heard him make the same promises to her, his voice strong and certain. She felt the weight of Queen Isabella's crown as it was placed upon her head, and tried not to think about whether she was worthy to wear it. But when the priest announced that they were husband and wife, when Edmund kissed her before the assembled court and whispered, "My queen," against her lips, all her doubts faded away. This was right. This was meant to be. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The celebration that followed was the most magnificent party Mara had ever witnessed. The great hall had been transformed into a wonderland of flowers and silk and candlelight. Musicians played from the gallery, while nobles and common folk alike danced and feasted and toasted the new queen. Mara moved through it all as if in a dream, accepting congratulations and well wishes from people she had never met, trying to remember names and faces and not embarrass herself with some breach of protocol. Edmund stayed close by her side, his hand at her back or his arm around her waist, anchoring her to the reality of what had just happened. "How do you feel, Your Majesty?" Sir Thomas asked during a brief lull between toasts. "Overwhelmed," Mara admitted, "and terrified, and happier than I have ever been in my life. A perfectly reasonable combination of emotions for a new queen. You will do well, I think." As the evening wore on, Mara began to relax and actually enjoy herself. The wine helped, but more than that, she began to see that not everyone in the room was watching her with judgment or suspicion. Many of the faces around her were genuinely friendly, genuinely pleased to see their king happy again. Even some of the nobles who had initially been skeptical seemed to be warming to her. Lord Harrison of Westfield, whose daughter had been among the rejected candidates, approached her during the dancing to offer his congratulations and pledge his continued support to the crown. "Your Majesty," he said with a bow that seemed sincere, "I confess I was uncertain about this match at first, but seeing the change in our king, the joy that has returned to his eyes, I believe you may be exactly what the kingdom needed. Thank you, my lord. I hope I can prove worthy of your faith. I believe you already have." It was nearly midnight when Edmund finally led her from the great hall to the privacy of their chambers. Mara's feet ached from dancing, her cheeks hurt from smiling, and her head spun slightly from the wine and the overwhelming magnitude of the day. "Regrets?" Edmund asked as he closed the door behind them. "None," Mara replied, and meant it. "You. Only that we waited so long to do this." He moved to her, his hands reaching up to carefully remove Queen Isabella's crown from her head. "How does it feel to be married to a king?" "I do not know yet. How does it feel to be married to a stable girl?" "Like coming home." He set the crown aside and cupped her face in his hands. "Mara, I know this will not be easy. I know there will be challenges and difficulties and people who will try to tear us apart. But I want you to remember this moment. Remember how right this feels. Remember that whatever comes, we chose each other." "I will remember," she promised. "And Edmund, I love you, not the king, not the crown, not the castle or the power or any of the things that come with being your wife. I love you, the man who worried about a restless horse and saw past a stable girl's circumstances to her heart." Their wedding night was everything Mara had dreamed, and nothing like what she had expected. Edmund was gentle and patient and loving, taking his time to worship her body and soul with a reverence that made her feel like the most precious thing in the world. When they finally came together, it was not just a joining of bodies, but a binding of hearts and spirits that felt like destiny. Afterward, as they lay entwined in the great four-poster bed that had once belonged to Queen Isabella, Mara felt as if she had been transformed into someone entirely new. Not just a wife now, but a queen. Not just a woman in love, but half of something larger and more important than herself. "What happens now?" she asked, her head pillowed on Edmund's chest. "Now we rule," he said simply. "Together, and we prove to the world that love can be the foundation of something great." The honeymoon period lasted exactly 3 weeks. It ended when a messenger arrived from the eastern provinces with news that Lord Catherine's father had imposed a trade embargo on all goods flowing to and from the capital. Grain shipments had been stopped. Merchant caravans were being turned back at the borders. The price of bread in the city markets had doubled overnight. Edmund read the message twice, his face growing grimmer with each word. Then he looked up at Mara, who was sitting across from him at the breakfast table in their private dining chamber. "It begins," he said quietly. "The grain embargo, the test. Catherine warned us this would happen. Now we get to find out if our love is strong enough to weather the storm she promised to bring." Mara set down her cup of tea with hands that trembled only slightly. "What do? We fight. We find other sources of grain. We negotiate with other lords. We remind the people that this kingdom existed long before Lord Westmarch controlled the grain trade, and it will exist long after he is gone. And if we cannot find other sources, if the other lords side with him..." Edmund reached across the table and took her hand. "Then we face whatever comes together, as we promised we would." The crisis deepened over the following days. Lord Westmarch's embargo was joined by similar actions from 2 other major trading partners. Lady Margaret's father withdrew his military support, leaving the kingdom's eastern borders dangerously undermanned. Even some of the smaller nobles began making excuses to avoid court, clearly waiting to see which way the wind would blow. But not everyone abandoned them. Lord Harrison kept his promise of support, using his own resources to help negotiate new trade agreements with kingdoms beyond Westmarch's influence. Several of the younger nobles, apparently inspired by their king's willingness to marry for love, rallied to Edmund and Mara's cause with an enthusiasm that surprised everyone. Most importantly, the common people seemed to approve of their new queen. Mara had worried that they would see her elevation as presumptuous, but instead they appeared to view it as proof that anyone could rise above their circumstances through courage and character. When she and Edmund made public appearances together, the crowds that gathered were friendly and supportive. "They see themselves in you," Sir Thomas explained after one particularly successful visit to the market square. "For the first time, they have a queen who understands what it is to work with her hands, to worry about debts, to know what hunger feels like. That means something to them. But will it be enough?" Mara asked. "When the grain runs short and the bread becomes too expensive for ordinary families to afford? That is what we are about to find out." The real test came 6 weeks after the wedding, when Edmund called a meeting of all the kingdom's major nobles to address the crisis. It was, Mara knew, a calculated risk. If the nobles united against them, the royal couple would be isolated and vulnerable. But if they could win over even a portion of the assembled lords and ladies, they might be able to break the embargo and secure the kingdom's future. The great hall was packed with representatives from every major house in the realm. Mara sat beside Edmund on the dais, wearing Queen Isabella's crown and her most regal expression, trying to project confidence she did not entirely feel. Edmund stood to address the assembly, his voice carrying clearly through the vast space. "My lords and ladies, you know why we are here. Certain parties have attempted to use economic pressure to influence the policies of this crown. They seek to punish the entire kingdom because they disapprove of my choice in a wife." A murmur ran through the crowd. In the front row, Lady Catherine sat with her father, her face a mask of cold satisfaction. "I will not stand for this," Edmund continued. I will not allow the people of this kingdom to suffer, because some among you believe that a king should marry for politics rather than love. Therefore, I am prepared to offer new terms to any lord or lady willing to stand with their rightful sovereign." He went on to outline a series of trade concessions and political reforms designed to strengthen the kingdom's economy and reduce its dependence on any single trading partner. It was a bold proposal, one that would require significant changes to the way the kingdom operated, but also one that promised greater prosperity and stability in the long run. When he finished, the hall was silent for a long moment. Then Lord Harrison stood. "Your Majesty," he said formally, "I pledge my house's continued support to the crown. My daughter may not have become queen, but I can see that you have chosen well. The realm is stronger with Queen Mara at your side." One by one, other nobles began to rise and voice their support. Not all of them, but enough. By the time the dust settled, Edmund and Mara had secured the backing of nearly 2/3 of the assembled lords and ladies. Lord Westmarch's face was thunderous as he realized his isolation. Lady Catherine looked as if she had been struck, but they were outnumbered and outmaneuvered, and they knew it. "You may have won this battle," Lord Westmarch said as he prepared to leave the hall, "but this war is far from over. Mark my words, Your Majesty. This marriage will be the ruin of you." "Perhaps," Edmund replied calmly. "But if so, it will be a ruin I choose freely, with the woman I love at my side. Can you say the same about your alliances, my lord?" In the months that followed, the kingdom began to transform itself. New trade routes were established with distant realms. Agricultural reforms increased crop yields and reduced dependence on imported grain. Military alliances were forged based on mutual respect rather than marriage contracts. It was not always easy. There were setbacks and challenges, and moments when Mara wondered if Lady Catherine had been right after all. But for every problem that arose, Edmund and his advisors found solutions, and gradually the crisis that had threatened to destroy them became the catalyst for positive change. Mara, meanwhile, was learning what it meant to be a queen. She established a school for the children of common folk, funded by royal coffers and staffed by scholars who had previously only taught the noble-born. She created programs to help widows and orphans, drawing on her own experience of loss and hardship. She even founded a new order of knights dedicated to protecting travelers and merchants, ensuring that the kingdom's new trade routes remained safe and prosperous. Most importantly, she never forgot where she had come from. Once a week, she still visited the royal stables, brushing the horses and talking with the stable hands who had once been her peers. It kept her grounded, reminded her that beneath the silk and jewels, she was still Mara Fletcher, the blacksmith's daughter who had learned to love a king. 1 year after their wedding, Edmund found her in the stables on one of these visits. She was grooming Moonbeam, the same mare whose restlessness had first brought them together. "Any regrets?" he asked, echoing the question from their wedding night. Mara looked up from her work, her face bright with contentment. "Only that we cannot go back and do it all again. Though I suppose once was quite enough excitement for one lifetime." "I love you, Queen Mara," Edmund said, moving to take her in his arms despite the hay and horsehair that clung to her dress. "And I love you, King Edmund, my king, my husband, my heart." As they kissed in the warm hay-scented air of the stables where their love had first bloomed, Mara marveled at the journey that had brought them here. From stable girl to queen, from despair to hope, from impossible dream to beautiful reality. The widowed king had indeed chosen her over 100 noble daughters, and in doing so he had chosen love over duty, hope over fear, and the promise of something better over the safety of what had always been. It had not been easy. It had not been without cost, but it had been worth every challenge, every struggle, every moment of doubt, because in the end, love had been enough. Not just to transform two hearts, but to transform an entire kingdom, and that, Mara thought as she held her husband close, was the greatest magic of all. The stable girl had become a queen, but more than that, she had become herself fully, completely, without apology or compromise, and in a world that often demanded people be less than they were, that was perhaps the most revolutionary act of all. Years later, when bards sang songs of their love story, they would focus on the romance and the drama, the obstacles overcome and the enemies defeated. But Mara always remembered it differently. She remembered the quiet moments, the gentle touches, the way Edmund's eyes lit up when he saw her across a crowded room, the way he still, even after years of marriage, looked at her as if she were the most wonderful surprise he had ever received. That was the real magic. Not the grand gestures or the political triumphs, but the daily choice to love and be loved in return. The decision to build something beautiful together, one day at a time, one moment at a time, one heartbeat at a time. The widowed king chose her over 100 noble daughters, but in the end, that was not the most important part of the story. The most important part was that she chose him back, and in choosing each other, they found not just love, but the courage to become the people they were always meant to be.